The What If Tales. Story 2. The Problem with Post. Written by Philip J. West. Nigel was afraid. Afraid of two noises in the world. It wasn't the buzzing of an angry swarm of bees, nor was it the bark of a feral dog. It certainly wasn't the noises that everyone dreads when they walk down the high street. Excuse me, madam or sir, have you thought about switching your energy provider? If you repent now, your soul will be saved. Omni here, they are part of a greater global conspiracy. Most importantly, it wasn't those people collecting for charities, the ones that people always say they already donate to, or will check the website out when they get home. They almost never do that, and those that are good for their word, they are a very rare breed. Back to Nigel, we can't forget this particular man. The sounds that would shake Nigel to his core was the rattle of the letterbox, along with envelopes hitting the floor. Now, for the most sensible and well-adjusted person, letters aren't something to be scared of. Nigel was in all respect a sensible, mild-mannered, and himself would say that he himself could do with a little bit of adjusting in life. He would tell you, it's not that I'm scared of the post, more that I'm quite angry that this sort of thing keeps being sent to me. The post that arrived, it wasn't letters of debt, and they weren't court summons of any kind. Everything else to do with his day-to-day life was now digital. The advertising leaflets were piling up next to his keys. Takeaway menus were stuffed in a drawer. But these things that came through the letterbox didn't bother Nigel. He always looked forward to the lengthy correspondence from his elderly great-aunt Mildred, who would write to him at great length about her exotic holidays, as she called them. He had never heard great-aunt Mildred actually speak. Writing things down was the only way she would communicate. Even his mum can't remember the last time she uttered a word. She wasn't mute or deaf. Writing out what she wanted to say was just her thing. Remember when she tried to bring that whiteboard on the plane? Nigel's mum was often heard saying. Everyone was grateful when she switched to a tablet, especially the airlines. The letters that gave him hives, the ones which he threw out soon as they hit the mat and filled his dreams with dread, they were letters which promised adventure. They weren't holiday brochures or invitations to events, because Nigel often loved to be invited to things, long as his social battery allowed it. What was being asked of Nigel? What made him shiver was that Nigel was often asked to go on quests. A princess needs rescuing from a tower, one of the letters said. One of them was what could only be described as a silver hockey puck, which he dropped and a hologram appeared of a pretty young woman. All hope rests on you, Nigel, the voice said. He hated this sort of post. It was worse than the spam and junk mail that came every other day. Roofing in driveways tarmacked for cheap. Jumble sale on this weekend. Omni here are the root of the subliminal thoughts that keep us up at night. These were the sorts of things that ended up on the side table. It all started when he turned 18. At first he thought he was being mixed up with another Nigel. One who was more courageous, possibly possessed a cleft chin, and could smoke a cigar without coughing. Not that Nigel would ever do something like that. Except for the time when he was 13 and nicked a cigarette out of his mum's handbag. With it sparked, Nigel had coughed up the entire contents of his school lunch. It was more of a surprise to him when the letters were now addressed to Nigel Edmund Richard Dunton. Even when the scrolls that came in an unknown dialect came through, he knew that his name was there, written in the squiggles and sigils. Honestly, there must be a mistake, Mum, Nigel cried when his mum brought in a wheelbarrow full of post. These wretched pieces of paper must stop. When Nigel moved out of the family home, which was the first of many moves, he thought that would put a stop to the letters. Mum, if you just scrawl on the back of the letter, return the sender, that should solve it. Nigel beamed proudly. It didn't work. They were always able to find him at any address he went to, even if it was just temporary. So he continued to move with a higher frequency. Nigel was grateful that his job allowed him to work remotely. I do love a Sunday, he said to his partner at the time. No post, no parcels, maybe a flyer or two, but there is no post. These people only use Royal Mail. There was a knock at the door. Nigel spotted the familiar red van parked up on the footpath. Really? Is there? He went pale, then the purple hive started to creep up his neck. It'll be fine, Nige. It's only... His partner tried to soothe him. Is nothing sacred anymore? Nigel pulled out a clump of hair which had become loose. Since he had turned 18, since the first call to action he received, Nigel had tried to contact the different organisations that sent them out. He often spent more time on hold on each call. Nigel was convinced it was a tactic to get him to hang up. Other numbers redirected him to a completely different business. Hello, Omni here Robotics Division. How may I be of assistance? The only one which answered his calls was the Heroes of Albion, and each call was less successful than the one before it. I'm sorry, Mr. Dunton. Is it okay to call you Knight? Okay, Mr. Dunton, it is. I know that you said numerous times that you didn't sign up to be a part of our guild. I can completely understand your frustration. No, we cannot. We have our policies and guidelines set in place by our forebearers. I know, but it is very much a prestigious position. My manager would only say the same thing, and he's out on a quest. Yes, one of many that's been piling up. We have an average questing times, you know. Yes, the position. It is for life. There can't be any exceptions or substitutions. I'm sorry, Mr. Dunton. I really am. We are, however, going around in circles, so I will be terminating this call. There was the click of a receiver. Nigel thought that they were following a very strict script. Maybe you should... Stacey was deciding on the right words. Nigel, you should... Nigel, if you went on one of those adventures, maybe, just maybe, they would leave you alone. It wasn't that Nigel hadn't thought of that before. He stood up from the table in the restaurant. That's where they get me, Stace. It'll be one quick quest. Save a princess from a dragon. Next I'll be in a fellowship tackling some unknown evil. It's like one of those free trials you aren't ever able to unsubscribe from. Oh, but they do have a contact number to speak to them. Except you can't cancel what you signed up for. The engagement was called off. Stacey had left abruptly, muttering about Nigel's fear of commitment. The letters had never bothered any of his partners. He had thought Stacey was going to be around for the long haul. It was around that time that the late night knockers started. The first time it happened, Nigel and Stacey thought someone was trying to break in. The letterbox was rattling. No post, he mumbled half awake. Go and check it. Stacey bolted upright in bed, nudging knives all in the ribs. The rattle noise grew louder. Nigel crept down the stairs, slowly avoiding the second to last step as it creaked. In the glow of the moonlight, he couldn't see anyone trying to reach for the keys. Instead, something was being pushed into the house. They were struggling to get it through the letterbox. You stop it now and— Ah! Nigel grunted. He grabbed what he now realised was a sword. It had sliced through his palms like it was butter. It clattered to the floor. The shadowy figures in the frosted glass started to run away. Attached to the hilt of the sword was etched with runes was a note that read, "Answer the call. Adventure comes for us all." Stace, we still got that first aid kit? Nigel ran to the kitchen searching for a tea towel. It wasn't long after that, once Stacey had left, Nigel invested in the video doorbell. He watched the hooded figures dropping off more and more parcels in the middle of the night. If I was to get raided by the police, they'd think I was amassing an army, Nigel said to one of his friends. Swords, shields, and some orb, which hums. I think it said it was a holy something. But I just stick it all up in the loft. Year after year, Nigel had moved further and further away from densely populated life, chased by the letters and weapons, changing occupations and eventually training to be a vet technician, moving to the island of Fula. It is as remote as you can get, Mum. Of course you can still visit. Nigel kept up his weekly calls with his mum. You'll just have to get 2 or 3 trains, maybe a 4th, and a bus if there's rail replacement. Then there's the ferry, you can't forget that. Then you meet Samson, he's great, and you'll find David his owner. They'll take you on the rowboat here. He also considered moving to somewhere in the Northern Territories of Australia. Nigel reconsidered it very quickly when he saw a documentary on the wildlife, and recoiled when he saw the size of the spiders. On the island itself, it was just him, 17 other people, and a few flocks of sheep. Post was infrequent. It once took him over a month to receive a debit card. Not that it mattered, because Nigel hadn't received one of those letters. That was pleasing to him. Nigel found himself enjoying life. He was seen skipping through the fields as he was tending to animals, and after 6 months, he made the acquaintance of a lovely lass named Moira, who lived on the main island of the Shetlands, and after a while there was something that did start to bother him. "Haven't received anything from Aunt Mildred, have I, love?" Nigel shouted to Moira in the kitchen. "Not since last Christmas. She sent us that lovely basket filled with all those cheeses and meats." Nigel called his mum as he was quite worried. There hadn't been a single postcard. He knew the harsh winter had set in, but Moira had received her post perfectly fine. "Oh, it's nothing to worry about, darling. Aunt Mildred is probably off on a cruise or something. Remember when she got lost in Peru for 2 years? Your granny did a nut in. So did Mildred's husband. God rest his soul." That put him at ease somewhat. It was true that Aunt Mildred did like to wander, and her not being verbal, it meant sometimes you'd only find out where she'd gone once you received a letter. Or if she got signal and email. Nigel had finally talked her around to using it years ago. "Well, I got what I wished for, didn't I?" Nigel said to Moira drunk one night. He had finally showed her the collection of letters, scrolls and hollow discs that he didn't thrown out, calling him to arms to help with some quest which needed a hero. "It's all very tempting. Weren't you ever tempted to go?" "Sometimes. But I know. Well, I don't know. I always thought they got the wrong Nigel. They needed someone. My initials, they spell out..." Moira kissed him hard on the lips, stealing his words away from him. "None of that now. You are plenty brave and handy with a sword. I've seen you. It's mostly for exercise. There isn't exactly a good gym here on the island." Nigel took another sip of his drink. "Besides, I wouldn't know where to strike a dragon effectively. If it's a Highlands, well, you strike them..." "Sorry, what was that?" "Don't worry, dear. Let's go to bed." Another year passed by. Earth had successfully rotated around the sun without any mishaps, and Nigel had even won a local award as a vet tech. It was the first Sunday of January, and he was woken up by a call from his mum. "You haven't heard from Aunt Mildred, have you?" "No, Mum. I haven't heard a word from her in the past year. I thought you said she was on a cruise." His mum started to sound frantic. Nigel was pacing around the living room as the fire kicked in. "I know, but even her friends, well, they haven't heard a peep. I was thinking of..." There was a knock at the door. He tried to ignore it, but the second and third knocks were insistent. When he opened the door, it was a very red-faced postman. "Special delivery." Nigel was handed the parcel. The postman looked for worse for wear as he wandered down the footpath. He watched as the postie looked left and right, like he didn't know where he was. Nigel, are you there, darling?" He stared at the chicken scratch writing on the cream envelope. "Yes, still here, Mum. Got a letter from Mildred. I'll call you back once I've..." Nigel pressed the end call button. He loved his mum, but she would have kept on talking, and he had some post to read. He placed the letter on the kitchen table, put the kettle on the stove and continued to stare at it. "Well, aren't you going to open it?" Moira said between mouthfuls of toast. He was rummaging through the kitchen drawers. Nigel pulled out a letter opener in the shape of a robot, a present from his aunt when she went to Japan. Just needed this. There was no photographs of a cruise or little trinkets. It contained a single piece of paper. Nigel took a deep breath and started to read the letter out loud to Moira. "My dearest and only great-nephew. I need your help. It appears that I've fallen into a spot of bother. It appears that the heroes of Albion, they really want you to take up their summons seriously. It does appear that it may have been my dear old Albert's fault. He had jokingly signed you up for all these groups, thought they were a joke thing, and maybe they'd send you amusing stories. Oh, how you liked the tales of a knight as a child. Your mother and father and everyone else had a good laugh. However, it seems that they are very much a real organisation. They are also very adamant about you finally paying your dues. Who knew they were real? So if you wouldn't mind coming to rescue me, only once you get the chance. I know you're terribly busy with the new job. Sir Garabond has kept me up to date. A vet tech, who would have known it? So when convenient, come and get me. I'm being kept well. Lots of love. Great Aunt Mildred. Kiss, kiss." P.S. Hope you're enjoying Scotland. I can't wait to meet Moira. You have to bring her to the next family gathering. P.S.S. If you could call Sylvia and make sure that Rocky goes to his vet's appointment, that would be really, really nice. Nigel's hands trembled as he set the paper down, the words on the paper blurring in and out of focus. He blinked back tears, he unlocked his jaw and stood up straight and counted to 10, breathing in deep and letting out a long sigh. Love, I'm going to be heading out for a bit. She just nodded as she watched Nigel walk over to a large wooden chest, and he pulled a key out from a book on the bookcase. He undid all the locks and looked inside, grabbing the sword that cut his hands many years prior. The scars still bothered him when it was cold. The note was still attached to the hilt. Answer the call. Adventure comes for us all. Nigel chuckled to himself. I guess that it does. He also pulled out a cloak which he draped over himself and strapped a small shield to his right arm. He spun the sword in his hand, parrying and slashing, just to test its weight. That was The Problem with Post. Thank you for listening. Good night, good evening, good morning, wherever you're listening. Tune in soon.